Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you are. And I want to especially say thank you and a warm welcome to all the governors, mayors, our partners, the government of Rwanda, city of Kigali, and our many other partners that are joining us in this year's, the 5th edition of ICLEI's Local Climate Solutions for Africa Congress, for the first time brought to you virtually from around the world to the rest of the world and to our African cities. So the theme of Local Climate Solutions for Africa this year, or LOCS4Africa, is financing for change. And today, in two sessions, this being the first of two, we are really diving in deeply in looking at how nature is part of that equation, how nature is fundamentally included in the answer to addressing climate change. And where does the finance come from, and how do we access it in our cities and in our towns? My name is Kobe Brandt. I'm the Regional Director of ICLEI in Africa and also the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI. It is my absolute pleasure to be moderating this session, introducing it to you as a session with the very pertinent name, When Nature Makes Sense, the economic value of nature for climate. And for the next 90 minutes, 1.5 hours, we will be bringing this session to you with a very rich panel, a lot of discussion, and a lot of insight, a lot of knowledge in this panel. And it's going to be translated in English, Portuguese, and French. So you are listening to me in English at the moment, but you are welcome to go to the buttons on your control and switch to the language of your choice. You can see here on screen how you can decide which language you are listening to, and it's available, as I said, in Portuguese, English, and French. I need to remind all attendees that apart from the simultaneous translations, they will be able to ask panelists questions in the Q&A box and the question and answer box. We will get those questions together and feed them through to the panelists, but unfortunately we cannot have a live discussion from the floor in the virtual auditorium to our panelists. But please make your questions, make your comments in the chat box. We have people who are capturing that and feeding that through to us. There will not be any live questions and answers. And you unfortunately can't raise your hand, we won't see you, but you can just raise your question by typing it up or your comment. And then if you have any technical difficulties during this session, please do contact our help desk on the platform through which you entered. And then I want to say that this whole panel is going to be recorded, this entire session, and will be made available for 90 days, 90 days after the session on the LOCS website platform for those who cannot be here today or for those who want to go and watch again and make some notes afterwards. We find that a lot of people are accessing these recordings already now during the 2 weeks that we've been holding this Local Climate Solutions for Africa Congress. So many more will access it over the 90 days, and you're welcome to do so. And if you've missed any of the other most exciting, wonderful sessions since last Tuesday, you're welcome to go and access those at your leisure. I want to again remind all panelists, type your questions and we will try and get them through to the panelists. If the panelists have any questions, please also make use of the chat box in the panelist room and we will respond to you. So I would like to move on to an overview really of what ICLEI is and what the Cities Biodiversity Centre of ICLEI is. And at this stage, I would like to ask that we bring up the relevant slides on ICLEI and the Cities Biodiversity Centre. For most of you who do not know ICLEI, we are the largest, oldest city network really dedicated to urban sustainability and sustainability issues in towns and cities and regions. formed by cities for cities in 1990. We're celebrating our 30-year anniversary this year, and it's wonderful to celebrate it also with LOCS. And so we have cities all over the world that are joining ICLEI, and we structure our work with cities, our technical work with our cities around 5 pathways. And you can see the 5 pathways there up on the screen. Of course, these pathways are very interlinked. And today we're talking about resilience, we're talking about nature, we are going to talk about low emissions development, circular development. So they're all interlinked. And of course, here in Africa, the equitable and people-centered development pathway, for us, we regard that as the most important pathway. These pathways together provide us with an opportunity to bring a range, a very wide range of technical and other support services to our cities, connecting them to each other so that they can leapfrog, learn from each other, and build up a community of cities where they can actually take action, because we all know that it's at the local level where the rubber hits the road, and it's at the local level where our mayors, governors, and city officials are making the most difficult decisions on a day-to-day in terms of how to run their cities. ICLEI Africa is home proudly to the Cities Biodiversity Centre, and the Cities Biodiversity Centre provides the entire ICLEI community with a centre where they can come to, one easy entry point where they can access a range of dedicated skills and services and expertise from here in Cape Town, the most biodiverse city in the world. So very apt that the Cities Biodiversity Centre is located here in Cape Town. But from here we serve all our 24 ICLEI offices with technical services, and of course are close to 2,000 cities in the ICLEI network. And it's from here that we also forge many partnerships with global organizations, regional organizations, and partners who are all dedicated to nature. So coming back to the session, we are at the moment looking at this particular session and when nature makes sense. The economic value of nature for climate. And I'd like to say that here, this session is made possible by our wonderful colleagues and friends in Swede Bio. And Swede Bio, of course, is located in Sweden, supported by CEDA, and it's done under the auspices of the program that Swede Bio is funding with ICLEI Africa, the Urban Natural Assets for Africa program, which is bringing urban natural asset services to 8 cities in 8 countries. And it's looking at from coastal management to rivers to other natural assets in the cities, and trying to turn these opportunities into livelihoods, jobs, economic value for the local community, but at the same time also build climate resilience, urban resilience, people resilience, etc. It's a wonderful program, and we're looking forward to many more years and further expansion of the Urban Natural Assets program in Africa. For more on it, please visit our website. And again, thank you very much to our friends at Swede Bio, together with ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Centre, who's bringing this session to you. So the session today is just as a very high level, before we go to the panelists, high level overview of it. We're really going to look at why is it difficult to see the economic value in nature. We so often take nature for granted, and it sometimes takes us being locked up, like for many of us during the pandemic, across the world, locked up away from nature, to really understand how deeply we are indeed connected to nature and how much it does mean to us in tangible and intangible ways. How much many of us, we hear it from all over the world, miss the walks in the park, miss just feeling and being out in the sunshine and in nature. So nature's got many values, but today we're focusing on how do we access, how do we realize that value? How do we quantify it? Can it be quantified? And then how do we find funding? Who's interested in investing in nature, and what would it take? What does a city need to do? How does a city build a business case so that nature can be part of the solution, as it should be, to address climate change and to build our cities in a more resilient way, and also that we can restore nature and the biodiversity loss that we see. In an unprecedented way, we are losing species, and we know the world is not on track to meet the global targets set for biodiversity and nature. So it's also very important that we look at restoration, and as the UN is entering the new decade of ecosystem restoration next year in January, you can be assured our cities, through networks like ICLEI and others, will be right there with the United Nations, because we know it's in our cities and towns that we can restore nature and bring back and mainstream nature as part of our daily lives, but also as a solution for climate. So replicability, scalability, business case for nature, that's going to be the focus. And without further ado, I would like to just say that with introducing the panel, I would just like to say that a lot of that discussion, you saw the map of Africa and you see the Urban Natural Assets, or UNA program as we refer to it. That program is deeply embedded in finding those answers. So that program is for us the way that we can work with a diverse range of countries and cities across Africa to try and unpack those very difficult questions. So our first panelists, you can see them on the screen here. We're going to go to Mr. Alok Banwal from the GF. But Alok is working specifically on financing, and he has got a specific interest and deep understanding and knowledge for the work of cities and the contribution that we bring from the urban dimension. So very warm welcome to Mr. Alok Banwal and Dr. Jane Turpie, very well known and very well respected scientist and academic in this field of specifically looking at the value of nature and building business cases around nature-based investments. And we're going to also then move to IUCN, Mr. Aloe Faye. We're very pleased that Mr. Faye can join us today. He's the Regional Director for Central and West Africa of IUCN. And of course, we know that IUCN has just recently also brought out a new gold standard for nature-based solutions and is deeply involved in targets and other measurable instruments in looking at how we can quantify or qualify or evaluate the nature contribution that towards addressing climate action. And then further, to just take you through the rest of our speakers, we've got from FAO, Dr. Rene Castro. Very warm welcome to you, Dr. Rene, who's the Assistant General, Director General of FAO. And we're going to hear a bit more about the Green Cities Initiative, very exciting launch recently of the Green Cities Initiative. And we're looking forward to that. Mr. Martin Locke is joining us from the Natural Capital Coalition, of course, deeply embedded in this very topic. Deputy Director, Martin Locke, we're very warm welcome to you. And then Mr. Janet Umugwaneza. Umugwaneza. My apologies, Janet. Janet, of course, works in our host city, Rwanda, in the Rwanda Environmental Management Authority, and is Program Manager for Environment and Climate Change Mainstreaming. And we're going to hear more about an exciting park, I believe, from Janet a little later. And then last but not least, Mr. John Tume, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Lilongwe City Council, one of our urban natural asset cities. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. John Chome. With that, you have the lineup of speakers, and I'm going to now go directly to Mr. Alok Banwal. But Alok, as Senior Climate Change Specialist and Coordinator of the groundbreaking and very welcome Sustainable Cities Program of the GEF, I would like to ask you, from your perspective and in your experience, what financial pathways and mechanisms exist for nature to address climate at the local level, specifically also in Africa?
Thank you, Kobe. Can you hear me, if you can confirm? Great.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for introducing me and thanks for inviting me to this important session. Africa is very important for Jeff. We have six countries and cities covered in under our Sustainable Cities program, and the most recent is the project that we approved for Kigali. And I know Rwanda is hosting this event, so I'm glad to let everyone know that with World Bank, we are supporting a project in Kigali that will very much focus on nature in cities, protecting some of the important wetlands, which are critical for the sustainable growth of Kigali and other cities. Having said that, in terms of the financial pathways, I think what is important first is to understand that nature can support climate action primarily in two ways. And these ways actually define the financial pathways as well. So first is, conserving or protecting nature around cities. So that's like the conservation part. And second is deliberately planned and managed natural ecosystems to provide climate benefits vis-a-vis gray infrastructure or complementing the gray infrastructure. So these are the two different ways, and as we all know, for conservation of and protection of nature, we have funds from the conservation funds, like under biodiversity, land degradation, and many of the domestic funds for dedicated for forest management and others are kind of supporting that. Uh, what is not there is that those conservation programs do not explicitly articulate climate as a co-benefit, or may not be using climate data as such or climate projections as such as part of the conservation effort. So that funding mechanisms of financing exist which can support the surrounding ecology or ecosystem of cities, which can conserve nature and make cities resilient. The second is the deliberately planned and managed natural ecosystem, which includes nature-based infrastructure, nature-based solutions. So the current landscape is that it is a bit scattered. There are many different ways nature is integrated, like sustainable land management, climate change adaptation, carbon sequestration projects. So they all have nature integrated in some ways, but not in a very consolidated manner. So so it's there, but probably needs to be more streamlined and more systemic so that nature is integrated better. So so to summarize, it's like conservation funds and climate funds which are there, and which local governments can access. Of course, they have to access through national governments. Currently, this the way the system is, but gradually, funds are changing their approach. For example, our Sustainable Cities program of Jeff, we are now working very closely with cities and local governments. I wanted to emphasize here is that these funds are more of catalytic in nature. So they try to capture the externalities. They try to create enabling environment. Uh, but for scaling up, it is important that the mainstream public and private finance is unlocked, because that's where we can really see the big change. Uh, there are infrastructure funds for cities. We have to make sure that nature-based infrastructure is part of that infrastructure planning. There are funds for urban planning. We have to make sure that nature is integrated in that planning. There are disaster funds. There are various private risk financing instruments which exist. So it is important that nature is part of that mainstream funding, so that the scale that we desire can be achieved. And finally, I'd like to conclude by saying that even for the climate and conservation funds, countries can make it more directed towards nature. And for that, what is important is that in deliberations in, for example, COP, in climate negotiations or others, they make it very explicit that, for example, Jeff financing or GCF financing has to be for nature. So, it has to be bottom up as well, and not always that, what funds decide to do. So that's, how we can really make much bigger scale interventions in nature for climate.
Thank you, and I think we all understand and are so grateful for Jeff taking that very, very bold step forward, launching the cities program a few years ago and now scaling it up so tremendously, and that's fantastic. Also fantastic to hear that some of that investment is coming to our cities here in Africa. But you mentioned, it needs to be mainstreamed more in the private and public sector and so on. Are we getting the message across? Are people understanding that it makes sense for a private company, for instance, to also rethink the way they do business and rethink the way they engage with nature and actually going out and investing in nature? How else could we, as city officials, make the case and find money for that critical work we want to do and we know it's needed in our cities at smaller scale, perhaps, and in each smaller town and city as well?
I mean, the perception is increasing, is improving, but of course we need to do a lot. At Jeff, and I know many other climate funds, we are working very closely with private sector in this, and also with public funds to see how we can, really make nature comparable with, other interventions or investments. But as I said, it's not that finance is not flowing to cities. Finance is there. It's just that how we prioritize nature is quite critical in the first step. Sometimes when we receive proposals from countries or cities, nature is not part of the package. Or from our side also, sometimes we believe that, okay, let's invest in proven solutions where we can get maximum value for money. So these it's like a two-way process. I can say that from the funding side, the things are changing. From our side, we are giving a lot of importance to nature, particularly in the COVID pandemic scenario, where we all know that the root cause is disruption to nature. So that's why from our side, we are doing that. But one of the key barriers is, I guess, which is going to be discussed in the panel today, is limited capacity to measure the monetary and the biophysical value of nature's climate benefits. I mean, that's fundamental. There is progress on accounting. There are cities and many local governments are doing natural capital accounting, but ultimately they have to also identify return on investments and things like that, which can then, really attract private sector to come in, understand the capital cost, operational cost, revenue streams, jobs, and all those kind of benefits, which can really create the right environment to invest. And we have recently initiated a project around this with the International Institute for Sustainable Development. We will be looking at nearly 45 to 50 projects across the world and use financial models to do the monetary and biophysical valuation of nature-based infrastructure projects. So we hope that those models and examples will help the market understand the value of nature, the true value of nature in delivering climate adaptation benefits.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Alok, and thank you for being with us and representing the Jeff here, the biggest funder for environmental issues in the world today. So thank you very, very much, and also for your commitment, your personal commitment to working with us as a city community. And I think you raised a question or an issue which I'd like to now bring to Dr. Jane Turpie. Dr. Jane Turpie is the director of Anchor Environment based here in South Africa. And Jane, I think Alok alluded to it. Why is determining the economic value of nature for climate? Why is it so difficult and complex?
Thanks, Kirby. Yeah, it is difficult, and it's taking years to get right, but we are making progress, definitely. But let me just start with mitigation. So here, the value of investing in ecosystem conservation or restoration is the avoided social cost of carbon, which is the global impact of climate change on GDP, expressed in terms of dollars per ton of carbon dioxide emissions. And to value this benefit, although the physical side of it is getting easier and easier to value as we have more information, satellite-derived information, valuing the benefit in economic terms relies on these global scale models of how different sectors respond to changing climate, as well as, of course, how the climate itself is going to change. So, of course, the estimates are fraught with uncertainty. There must be well over 30 studies that have tried to do this, and the estimates vary quite widely. And there's also a growing school of thought that's really saying that these most popular models that we're using are way underestimating the social costs of carbon. So there's an enormous amount of uncertainty on those estimates. And then if we think about adaptation, here we're trying to value ecosystem contribution to resilience, and that involves understanding detailed relationships between ecosystem characteristics, their extent and condition, and a whole suite of ecosystem services that they supply, like hydrological sediment flows and water quality, the contribution of pollinators to crop production, etc. That requires multiple disciplines, detailed models, and the best of which are usually applied at very small scales in localized contexts. So now we're trying to do this at scale, especially for natural capital accounting. It's very, very challenging. It is getting better with satellite data, but we still rely heavily on local level data and research, which is always in short supply, especially in developing countries and in Africa. And then that's just the supply side of the evaluation problem. We also need to understand the demand for nature's services and how this is going to change over time as populations and incomes increase. So there's a lot to factor into estimating returns to investing in nature. So we're getting better at understanding how we can reduce some of the risks that we face, like floods or human-wildlife conflict, but we're not actually very good at quantifying some of the more intangible contributions that nature makes to community resilience. So for example, we don't always capture the importance of some resources that are used only as a fallback in times of crisis. So, the COVID epidemic gives us a great example of this. Where would many families be now if it weren't for the option of going to hunt or fish for something to eat? So nature sort of provides this insurance, if you like. And even if we did quantify these benefits, they are accruing to poor households. And the nature of valuation is that values are linked to people's ability to pay. So we might only get small values. Whereas, in fact, there's so much more at stake to society as a whole, such as the massive potential cost of human migration. We don't even factor that in. And then, of course, there's option value that extends into future generations. Just remember that the value of nature has only really become a thing in the last few decades as it's become more scarce. And that situation is changing at an exponential rate, and our current tools don't deal with that very well. So in a nutshell, I think we're radically underestimating the potential returns to investment in nature, and it's really hardly surprising that natural climate solutions really only receive about 3% of climate finance, I believe. So yeah, we're getting better, but we have a long way to go.
Long way to go, and complex questions to be answered. And as you say, not everything can be brought down to quantification of values. So I would like to ask you then, just as a quick follow-up, a very short follow-up, what would be the key criteria or principles that you think we need to adequately make the case for nature, for investing in nature? What would you recommend, just as a short?
Okay, yes, sure. I think we have to show a positive net benefit to society over the long term, that our investments are leading to a consistent benefit, saving costs over time, like deferring the need for new infrastructure investments. There has to be a high degree of certainty. There's been masses of investment in nature-based solutions on the continent, but with a high rate of failure because Not all projects have covered all their bases. We need a watertight theory of change to minimize the risk of failure. I think the investments need to be large or very scalable. We've seen from the latest IPCC report that we have to go big. And fourth, maybe it needs to produce multiple ecological benefits. It might be cheaper to focus on, say, just carbon by afforesting with alien trees, for example, but this would deprive society of a whole lot of value. So we need to value ecosystem integrity in all of this.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. And I think thanks for that insight. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into that a little bit later. Our next speaker, Mr. Aliyu Faye, as I mentioned, is the Regional Director of Central and West Africa from IUCN. And Mr. Faye is joining us live now from IUCN. Mr. Faye, I would like to ask you, in light of what we heard from Dr. Turpie, post-implementation of nature-based work, after we've done our nature-based work in a space, what criteria are needed to actually showcase and demonstrate the return in investment for improved scalability and replicability?
Thank you very much, Kobe. Before responding directly to the question, please let me remind that nature-based solutions, NBS, can and will be scaled up and replicated if they help address climate mitigation objectives at costs that are competitive to the mitigation of greenhouse gas in other sectors of economy, such as energy and transportation. It is also necessary that scale of NBS for climate is such that they can make a difference. Even if NBS for climate were low cost, they will not be important if there are not enough opportunities to significantly contribute to national and international goals and commitments. So what is the situation in Africa now? In Africa, NBS for climate have the promise to be both cost-effective and available in sufficient scale to make a difference. Nature for Climate, in an international initiative which IUCN is a member of, recently estimated that Africa could reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 22% by deploying cost-effective natural climate solutions. This is important because the more than 50 countries in Africa are responsible for almost 1/10 of the local emission targeted for reduction in Paris Agreement. What may be particularly interesting in Africa is that many countries could exceed their national country pledges through natural climate solution alone. So from that perspective, NBS for climate could be an opportunity for gathering further investment by the international community in climate mitigation in Africa and to elevate ambition in a continent with relatively low emission and large potential. 1/5 of the total global tropical forests are in Africa. Research in Nature for Climate confirms that avoid deforestation has the greatest potential of climate mitigation from nature, followed by improved forest mangrove management and reforestation. Returning to your question, fully validating the climate and other benefits from NBS requires evidence. What is needed is more experience and combined with robust evaluation and varying environment and socioeconomic conditions. Only practical implementation and robust evaluation can confirm how to best harness NBS for climate so it's effective, cost competitive, and available in sufficient scale to make a difference. We also need to go beyond the climate benefits from NBS and better understand how to develop NBS for climate while also delivering other benefits, such as supporting local livelihoods, food security, employment, biodiversity conservation, ecosystem services that nature supports, and the intangible that is mostly non-material, like cultural, spiritual, aesthetic, and recreational. Globally, the most important criteria is the cost effectiveness of NBS, because NBS offers a wide range of benefits, tangible and non-tangible, while in general, man-made solution-grade infrastructure have a narrow range of benefits, usually tangible, with slightly side effects. We need to make the tangible and non-tangible benefits of the NBS more visible to decision makers so that they can compare with the cost of investing in those solutions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those insights. And following on that, and being from IUCN, I can't resist to ask you to just reflect a little bit on this statement. The statement says, it is not a question of determining the true value of biodiversity or ecosystems, but the economic value associated with the protection of biological resources. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Your comment, just briefly, please.
Regarding this statement, you can say that it goes without saying that the true value of biodiversity or ecosystem is difficult, if not impossible, to determine precisely. There are many different value perspectives to nature and biodiversity, including not only economic, but also ethical and cultural values. Several of them can be true at the same time, and different values are not necessarily commensurate and comparable. The economic consideration of ecosystem and biodiversity does not exclude other values, but it can help to understand the economic benefits that nature brings us. Ignoring the economic value of nature makes it likely that when decisions are made, the values of nature are more or less ignored, effectively assumed to be zero. We know that nature is valuable, so explicitly considering economic benefits from nature can help improve decisions regarding nature and natural resources to better incorporate the value of nature. But that should not be the only guiding principle. And it is also important to recognize and incorporate ethnical, cultural, and social values. In the context of NBS for climate, the issue of our limited knowledge of the true value of ecosystems and biodiversity is important to bear in mind. It is quite tempting to focus on the climate benefits from nature and manage nature accordingly. But the unique feature of nature is that it generates multitude of benefits, of which climate is only one. Often, the different benefits support another, but sometimes there are trade-offs. Therefore, we have to manage nature with multiple benefits, not just the climate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Faye. Thank you very much for those remarks. And I think it also puts in perspective what I think we've heard from others as well, that it's not just there to address our issues, man-made or human-induced climate change, that it is actually a fundamental necessity for life on Earth, at least for humans to survive on planet Earth, that we look after nature. So thank you very much. And with that, let's move. We've heard, thank you. We've heard about food being mentioned more than once now already in these few minutes that we've been together. I'm now turning to Dr. Rene Castro, who is the Assistant Director General of FAO. Your business is food, but there's so many facets to the work that FAO is doing. So thank you very much for joining ICLEI here today. It's our privilege, and we really appreciate also our collaboration between ICLEI and FAO, and we'd like to see that deepen in the years ahead, especially now that you've been championing and launching very recently the Green Cities Initiative. We were there, and we look forward to collaborating with you, not only here in Africa, but globally as this program matures and rolls out. Can you please tell us about this work, the Green Cities Initiative of FAO, and unpack how you have made the case, the economic case for investing in such a very ambitious and timely program?
Thank you, Kobe and colleagues. And let me start with a bit of a challenge. If, like we were taught at university and in the academia, valuing biodiversity or nature will be kind of vaccine against destruction. That was the theory. But recently, FAO published the State of Biodiversity for Food and Agriculture, almost at the same time that IPBES published the State of Biodiversity. And there were several similarities. Both biodiversities are trending down. We are losing domesticated agricultural biodiversity as well as the other biodiversity. And you would agree with me that in general, agricultural biodiversity has better pricing signals. I mean, you find from fruits and vegetables and fish and trees with some values in the market, and you find even some values at the genetic, at the breeders' markets. And still we're losing biodiversity for food and agriculture. So this is a first challenge. Secondly, going to the green cities. We are observing in the world a trend, both in developed and developing countries, for the people going toward cities. And FAO has been dealing essentially with rural communities. And these rural communities are diminishing, and partially because there is a problem of equity between rural and urban, rich and poor, and also affecting women that in several countries, especially in Africa, are extremely relevant for food production. So we are observing that trend, more people going to cities. That will also mean there will be an increase of the demand of water, an increase of the demand of food, and an increase of the demand for green areas, for recreation, for nature contact, for the value of your real estate. I mean, people value to be in front of a park. That park could be in New York, in Central Park, or in London, in Hyde Park. Everywhere. Here in Rome, we have the Villa Borghese, and people love to be there. So we decided that it's about time for FAO to contribute substantially to think what is this new city, how the future city should look like. And this is our aim. We want to have at least 1,000 cities in our program working in these concepts. You know, how we better manage the water, the energy, the green spaces. But let's not forget how we manage better the food waste. You know, we are wasting about 14% of the food in the post-harvest. Okay, and another 14% in the supermarket and at the household level. So it's about 1/3 of the food that is being wasted. That would be enough to feed all the world's population today. So we are, in addition to that moral, I mean, we are in Rome, and in Rome we have the Pope Francis, and the Pope has been saying this is a sin. It's a moral challenge. How can we waste food if we have people with hunger? In addition to that, we are increasing inefficiency, using more energy, more water, more soil, more labor, and affecting biodiversity and affecting the atmosphere, meaning by that climate change. So we need to reverse that and think how the future city will look like. And let me finish with this. In addition to that, we are running out of time. Recently, about a year and a half ago, we published an article in Science saying there are about 2 billion hectares of degraded land in the world. Misused, degraded land with no production ability today. We calculated that if we restore about 900 million hectares of those 2 billion, we will not compete with cities, with existing forests, and with food production. If we do that, that will cost us about 300 billion US one time, but that will give us 10, 15 years of breathing time, of reducing the emissions concentrating in the atmosphere, and will give us chance to develop new transportation options, new energy technology, and power sources. I mean, we are close to that, but both in transportation and energy, they are not there available in the marketplace. The world still needs 10, 15 years, but we can do it using nature-based solutions. So my point is, we know what we have to do. We know what we have been doing is not working. Still, we have that closing window of time, 10, 15 years to act, and to act decisively, or we will be reaching the point of no return. Thank you, Kobe. Back to you.
Thank you, Renee. And just as a follow-up on that, the urgency, absolutely, we feel it, we sense it every day. But we also sense the readiness from so many cities around the world and here in Africa that are ready and quite desperate to act for their people. You know, you're talking about food waste. There's a lot of hungry people in our cities in Africa, also in my country, in South Africa even. And yeah, we can make a difference. Mayors know what's needed to be done, yet it's very difficult. It remains very difficult for them to get the funding that they need to mainstream nature-based solutions. And it's also here where our cities are growing most rapidly and very fast, where we can still make a difference, where there is still nature that is intact, and where we can bring agriculture and biodiversity closer together in an economic way that makes sense. So let me ask you, How do you make a business case for nature-based solutions, speaking from an FAO point of view? Just a quick reflection on that, please, Rene.
Yes. Out of these 1,000 cities that we would like to promote as an example, we can see a large number of activities that are bankable. For example, if you replace the energy for cleaner sources of energy, that is bankable. If you replace the old transportation options for a newer one with lower emissions standards, with more efficient, that is bankable. If you want to increase the quality of the drinking water, that is bankable. If you want to increase the quality of the way you manage the sewage water, the already used water, that is also bankable. What is not bankable yet is the other part. If you want to increase, let's say, the greening areas for entertainment, for enjoyment, if you want to increase the soil, the organic soil quality and keep it to have it productive or with horticulture, that is not yet bankable. And we will need to combine donors' money with banks. This is part of the strategy FAO will be doing, helping the mayors to make their case if there is a bankable possibility, and helping also them to make their case to the donors if the only option is a grant, and small NGOs or small communities organize, so to relaunch, for example, forgotten foods in Africa. That will be some of the options that will be our responsibility to work with. It will also require from the mayors to accept that if a project is bankable, for example, a new real estate development with more green and better options, that is a bankable option. They need to realize that, and that is nonsense to try to get donors to give you free money for that. So that will take a change in the culture. We are willing to work on that, and we are optimistic that Africa, that is the hopeful continent in terms of food production, in terms of demography, in terms of the scale of the activities you can offer as nature-based solutions. For example, of the 900 million I mentioned, that will give the world 10, 15 years to manage the climate, at least half of those hectares are in Africa.
Wow. Okay.
So that's Africa is the hopeful continent for the whole world. Thank you, Kofi. Back to you.
What a wonderful message to us here in Africa. Thank you. The hopeful continent, and also the youthful continent, if I may add. We've got a youth bulge, which is certainly going to lead to exciting things. Thank you, Mr. Castro. And I want to say congratulations on the Green Cities launch. We're looking forward to collaborate with you. We already see a lot of possibilities to work with you in our Cities with Nature program, which already has a couple of 100 cities committed to mainstreaming nature. Wonderful connections there that we can make with Green Cities. So we look forward to a fantastic decade of fast, rapid, and deep action together with FAO. Thank you for your contribution. And I want to now move over to Martin Locke. Mr. Martin Locke is the Deputy Director of Natural Capital Coalition. And Martin, I think you've been really waiting patiently to come in here, listening to what others have said. Can you please tell us, how does Capitals Coalition support nature-based solutions in its programs?
Yes, thank you very much. I assume you can hear me and see me, so that's all good. Thanks for inviting me, and I definitely will answer that question. And in a certain way, it's good that I can follow on others who've spoken so well before me, because I can kind of pick on what they have said. Just to start with the last speaker who spoke briefly on forgotten foods. So I'm from the Natural Capital Coalition, the Capitals Coalition, also for other capitals. And we are all about forgotten values. So that's our core business. And we are an international coalition of business, finance, but also governments that has come together to transform the way we take decisions. We think that's necessary because in a lot of the decision making nowadays, not all relevant values are taken into account, so they don't play a role when we take decisions. And our ambition is to change that. And we do this by making the measurement and evaluation of the so-called forgotten values, as I framed them before, to make them better measurable and valuable. And to help business, finance, and governments to do that, we have created a natural capital protocol, which is a 9-step process. It's a recognized international framework with 9 steps that help you to measure and value your impacts and dependencies on natural capital. So, on the distinction between impacts and dependencies, we've learned from our partners in business, finance, and government is an important one, because impacts are your effects as for example, a company, your negative or positive effects to nature. Your dependencies is what you need from nature, so the resources and the ecosystem services that you draw upon if you produce food or clothes or whatever you are producing as a business. So by providing this natural capital protocol together with a toolkit with metrics that is applicable across all sectors, across all levels of decision making, we help people to take nature-based solutions into account. So why do I make the link to nature-based solutions? A lot of the time we see that nature-based solutions are not selected because people do not value the positive outcome of nature-based solutions. If you make that visible, then organizations tend to make other decisions. Just to give a few examples, in the Mambamba wetlands near Kampala in Uganda, there the government, with support of the WAVES program, a World Bank program, has accounted the values of the different values of this wetland for the people living around it, including Kampala. And based on that valuation, the responsible government can take better decisions how to manage this wetland for the well-being of people as well as for the animals and the plants living there. Also at a municipal level, for example, in Manchester, so the United Kingdom, the government has looked into the value of the green areas and also for the health of the people. So the previous speaker said that sometimes it's difficult to find bankable projects for green for enjoyment, but one of the things we see is that green is not only for enjoyment around cities, it's for health. And in Manchester, they found out that green areas help to lower down the money they need for health. My last remark at this stage is one problem voiced earlier is the limited capacity of governments or businesses to take into account the value of nature, and we definitely acknowledge that. So there is a need to build capacity. We do this around the globe. In Africa, we've organized in just before summer a series of webinars together. It formed a forum on green economy based on natural capital approaches. And this was a way to bring together the practitioners, show examples, discuss next steps, and we will follow this up. The World Bank has set up a community of practice with the statisticians in Africa, and as Capitals Coalition, we are in the process of setting up a working group for business to connect them with statisticians, with policymakers, to discuss how they can jointly work to improve bringing nature into the decision-making process.
Thank you very much for these rich and deep comments as well coming from you, Martin. And I'm so glad you mentioned the Mambamba wetlands. I had one of my most memorable days there when I was lucky enough to see the elusive spoonbill. And it just, that's just one example of so many across our continent where there are jewels that are lying there untapped and which could bring such resources into the local economies. And thank you for organizations like yourselves that help make unlock these potentials. So I'd like to ask you, do we need a new way to value nature for climate? Do we need a new way? Are your 9 steps the way? Can we go there, or is there something else that's needed? How can we actually move forward to realize the value of nature more directly in the context of climate action?
Thanks. It's a very good and prominent question, but first allow me to say how connected the world is. I'm here in the Netherlands. You're talking about the spoonbill. 10 years ago, I managed the natural conservation area program in the Netherlands, and one of the projects was for the spoonbills traveling from the Netherlands to Africa. So the world really is a small place. But your question, do we need a new way to value nature? I think the answer is we need the old way. So we've forgotten how to value nature. So if you speak with populations across the world, usually the so-called older populations, the indigenous people, usually they already value nature. And we have forgotten to value nature in the western part of the world, I sometimes think. So what we need to do is to bring in the old language and the old knowledge. Also, there's already a lot known, but it's not practiced, it's not applied. For example, if you look to climate change, a lot of the times we know how to value nature in relation to, for example, climate adaptation, but too often the climate problem is kind of reduced to reducing carbon emissions, and then you forget about nature-based solutions. So if you take everything on board and you include also the old language before the current economic paradigm came into play, which is not that long ago, it's a couple of decades, it's not longer. Then I think we will manage nature much better than we are doing currently.
Thank you. We need the old way. Sometimes new isn't always better. And sometimes what's right in front of us is what we cannot see until we lose it. So thank you very much, Martin Locke, for your insights and for the great work, in fact, that your organization is doing. And thank you also for collaborating with us as we unpack these issues in a very practical way in our cities across Africa. Let's go to a city in Africa now, our host city, Kigali. And I'm going to ask Janet Umugwaneza, who is the Program Manager of Environment and Climate Change Mainstreaming, an entire program in the Rwanda Environmental Management Authority. Janet, thank you first of all very much to the government of Rwanda and also to our colleagues in the city of Kigali for partnering with ICLEI to make LOCS possible, to bring this Congress to Africa, to our cities and to the rest of the world. And we're very, very honored and delighted to have you with us. So Janet, may I ask from you, from an African perspective, what is the Environment and Climate Change Mainstreaming Program in Rwanda doing to build climate resilience through nature-based solutions? How are you making the economic case for nature-related work in your program?
Thank you so much, Kobe. It's my pleasure to join this conversation. In Rwanda, as you all know, or some may know, Rwanda is considered as a natural-based economy country, meaning the economy of the country depends from the natural resources. Also, Rwanda is a southern hill country. With that structure of the country, how the country is, it also brings the opportunity, but also some challenges to some issues that sometimes result into issues of soil erosion, landslide in some parts of the country due to the landscape of the country. So in terms of mainstreaming, the government of Rwanda have already recognized that as a natural resources-based economy country, it has to put environment and climate change, of course, with conservation and biodiversity management at the front of its development agenda. So from the nation, at the national level, we have Vision 2050, of course, which aims for the country to be a high-income country by 2050, and also as a green and climate-resilient economy, meaning all other nation strategy for development have to fall into that direction of promoting green economy and climate resilience economy. So in terms of mainstreaming, we've made efforts of making sure that all nation strategic documents have considered and have integrated those aspects of environment, climate change, and biodiversity management so that they can guide the implementation and decision making. Right now, we have a National Strategy for Transformation, which will be 7 years program that has recognized environment and climate change and natural resources as source of the income, and also that promotes the green economy and sustainable use and management of natural resources. And all that have been also transformed into our district development strategies to guide the implementation at district level. With the structure of the country, of course, we have the city of Kigali, we have 4 provinces that also have districts. So we have 30 districts in the country, and each district have district development strategy that has included environment and climate change, or what we call green aspects, into the strategy for the development of the district, but at the country level. Also in 2021, Rwanda launched a Rwanda Green Growth and Climate Change Resilience Strategy, which aimed at guiding, which showed the long and short-term priority actions the country has to take in mainstreaming environment and climate change for green growth approaches in different economic sectors, such as agriculture sector, infrastructure, industries, and other sectors. As we speak, this strategy is being also revised because the country have also submitted its national determined contribution NDCs on how the country of Rwanda is going to deal or respond to the Paris Agreement in terms of its contribution to through adaptation and mitigation, reducing emission from its development activities. So all these have been mainstreamed from nation, and now it has to be transformed into the implementation at the local level. In terms of putting this into actions also, different projects and initiatives have been initiated. Different projects are being implemented. Some of them where some of the parks, some of the forests have been rehabilitated and gazetted into a national park. In 2015, we had a project funded by Jeff through World Bank that was meant to rehabilitate one of our forests called Gishwati and Mkura Forest. This forest has been gazetted as one of the 4th national park now in the country. And recently, just in October, the park was nominated by UNESCO as one of biosphere reserves, of the world. So those are some of the efforts in terms of mainstreaming, because the country has already took the direction of taking the green economy and climate resilience economy as an option for the country. So in terms of also continuing bringing this into action, we have different projects that are being implemented, but also have one that are in pipeline. I think Aloke from Jeff has mentioned the Sustainable City Program. Rwanda is one of the beneficiaries of this. So we have a project called Rwanda Urban Development Project, which has a Sustainable City Program that we are going to be implementing with integrative nature by how the project was designed. So this project will be focusing in the city of Kigali and also secondary cities. In the city of Kigali, it's going to look at the rehabilitation of some of urban wetlands that we have in the city of Kigali. For those who know the city of Kigali, it's a beautiful city with so many hills, but also surrounded by many wetlands in the valleys. So every valley we have in the city of Kigali has at least a wetland. And previously, some of these wetlands were used for other economic activities. So some of them actually were home for some of the industrial park until the government realized that it's time to now reclaim those wetlands and have them rehabilitated so that they can have their capacity to, to support the city of Kigali in terms of flood attenuation, for water quality enhancement, and also to create green space that is variable in terms of recreation areas in the city of Kigali. I would also want to say that in the recent years, the Kigali city have been really affected by floods, and all this has really made the case to everyone to realize that it's time actually to rebuild the resilience of the city by bringing in this type of initiative that looks at the, nature-based solution that could enhance the resilience of the city in terms of flood management, but also for reducing greenhouse emissions from different economic activities in the city of Kigali. So this is one of the programs that we are excited to implement, part of other countries that are going to implement them in Africa. But we also have other projects we had already started of rehabilitating some of our wetland for for conservation purposes, but also as ecotourism park, one of them being Nyandungu Ecotourism Park. So all these efforts are here to, they are being implemented to build resilience to the city, to the country, but also to create the well-being of the communities around, create green jobs for the youth in the city, and also women being the biggest number of the population we have in the country.
Janet, I'm going to have to ask you to end here. You know, what I can see here is such passion and drive, and no wonder Rwanda is such a shining light around the world for what it's achieving. So I believe there's much more you can tell us about what you do. But you said some profoundly important things. Rwanda is the first country this year that has submitted its new NDC. So that is really something that is inspiring to the rest of Africa, and also showing us that it can be done. So congratulations on that, and congratulations on that UNESCO status that was achieved. You know, I mean, this is fantastic. And yeah, Alok is messaging me in the chat box saying that Mr. Alok Banwal from the JEF is messaging me to say that is the JEF project, the JEF one you mentioned around Kigali, that you recently got funding through the JEF. So it can be done. Here's a demonstration of how a business plan was put together, how the national government as well as the JEF came together and actually mobilized those resources. So we're definitely going to take that lesson learned and so many other of your good practices and share it with the rest of the cities and countries in Africa. Here also we see in everything you say a prime example of multi-level governance at work, where you actually work as national government but really embed the work deeply in your cities and regions and districts, as you mentioned. So thank you very much with such passion. No wonder that Rwanda is such a beacon of light and hope for so many others. So thank you very much, Janet. We're coming to an end to the session, but there's one more speaker from an African country. Thank you, Janet. There's one more speaker, and this is a pre-recording, but very important from the heart. We are now turning to another country, and to the city of Lilongwe in Malawi. Mr. John Chome, Executive Officer. And here's a pre-recorded video from Mr. Chome. Stay with us. We're going to close the session after this video. Thank you very much.
It is the capital city of Malawi, and in recent years, we have been facing a number of DRM issues, but also climate change issues, increasing in frequency, but also in intensity. And a number of things have been done in Lilongwe, both, if you like, upstream activities at the policy level, but also downstream at the operational level. So let me start with the policy or the normative work that we have done in the city of Lilongwe to address issues of disaster risk reduction, but also climate change. We have worked with a number of partners, specifically UNDP, UN Habitat, and also ICLEI, especially on a number of these normative activities, but also on the operational activities. So, for example, with ICLEI, we had the Urban Natural Assets for Africa, Rivers for Life, whose work helped us to produce some hotspot maps of our areas of our biodiversity in the city, so that those maps could help us in making decisions in terms of planning, but also in terms of development. So that one, we conserve biodiversity, but also secondly, we ensure that our natural assets continue to provide the ecosystem services for the city. And we know that these natural assets are also very important for urban resilience, but also for disaster risk reduction. We have got a lot of wetlands, for example, which act like sponges for excess flood water. And we want to preserve those wetlands so that they can continue to perform that ecosystem to protect the city from serious flooding. We have also worked with UN Habitat to produce a city resilience action framework. This city resilience action framework targeted some 2 areas of the city which are prone to flooding. These are Mtandire settlement, which is home to about 20,000 residents, and also Karieka residents, Karieka settlement, which is home also to a similar number of residents. So through this city resilience action plan, we have outlined a number of activities at the community level, but also at the city level, to help in addressing disaster risk, but also climate change issues. We have therefore begun to implement some of the provisions of this normative work, now bring it down to implementation at the community level, but also at the city level. At the community level, for example, we are creating an early warning system for Lingas River, which is the river that floods most. So we are putting river gauges. We're also working with communities so that they have got the necessary equipment, tools, training, and all capacities for them to be able to operate an early warning system. We are also working with communities in those 2 settlements which are most prone to flooding, to improve their drainage. This is through a project called Disaster Risk Management for Resilience that the Department of Disaster Management Affairs in Malawi, DODMA, supported by UNDP, we are collaborating with those institutions. We're also working to enhance our natural assets in the city. For example, we are creating public parks. ICLEI has supported us to create a public park in a residential area called Area 18 in the city. But the City Council is also working to create a large public park along the Lilongwe River, which is going to be part of a major ecological project that we call Lilongwe Ecological Corridor Project. Now, this project, the aim is to promote conservation of biodiversity, but also to promote the ecosystem services that these natural assets are providing for us. So this corridor includes our 2 major rivers in the city, which is Lilongwe River, Lingas River. We also have a nature sanctuary, which is an area that is left in the middle of the city as a conservation area, and we also have a botanical gardens. So all these systems, we are putting them together to form an ecological corridor that will become the heart and the soul of the city of Lilongwe. We are also working with communities, particularly in preparedness. We have supported the formulation of what we call civil protection committees. These are community-based structures that are supposed to work in prevention and preparedness, but also to work in response when disasters happen, as well as support recovery and reconstruction activities. So we have started with the 2 most flood-prone, disaster-prone areas, but we intend to scale this up to cover the whole city of Lilongwe. So these are some of the key activities that we are doing in the city of Lilongwe to address disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation.
Thank you very much. I think we have now heard also from a city on the ground deeply committed to these issues and making great strides over a number of years. And let me just say, it's again a manifestation of how interconnected these things are and what a journey people go on together. So with this, I would just like to say we've come to the end of our session. What a wonderful session. There's much more to discuss. We're going to unpack much more on this issue, deep dives with cities, learn from countries like Rwanda, but also from a number of others. And then with this, I would like to just say thank you very much for attending, and for all our panelists, thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Please join the rest of our LOCS sessions. There's another one about to start on biodiversity. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. You are welcome to stay and join the other session in the auditorium. It's starting in half an hour. It's going to actually take the climate finance discussion further and investable projects further, focusing this time on Tanzania. So you're welcome to tune into that as well. And thank you to all participants. Once again, thank you very much to the panelists as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kobe.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
So, Janet and Mr. Fay, I just want to say a huge thank you.